In the previous video, we looked at an economic critique of colonialism. In this video, we will continue with this and we look at Dadabhai Naoroji's drain theory. Right? Dadabhai Naoroji was one of the tallest leaders within the Indian National Congress. Dadabhai's drain theory of May 1867 was to form the centerpiece of the colonial economic critique. He, along with other national leaders, pointed out that a large part of India's capital and wealth was being transferred or drained to the British in the form of salaries and pensions of British civil servants and military officials working in India. You also had interest on loans taken by the Indian government, profits of British industries in India, and the home charges or expenses of the Indian government in Britain. Apart from the existing imports and exports, there was also a particular amount of money which colonial India contributed towards administration, maintenance of the army, war expenses, pensions of retired officers, and other expenses accrued by Britain towards maintenance of her colony. These were known as home charges, and this was paid entirely almost by India. The home charges were made up of three major components. One, the interest payable on Indian debt. Second, interest on the railways. Third, civil and military charges. These three together formed the home charges. Due to the drastic collapse of international trade and the very little revenue obtained from it, India could only pay off her home charges by selling off her gold reserves. From 1931 to 32 and 34-35, India exported rupees 2,330 million worth of gold, even while people were starving and poverty was common and rife. That is 2.3 billion rupees worth of gold was exported in just 2 financial years. This was the kind of loot that the British did during their entire colonial rule in India. And this was happening at a time when poverty was very common and people were starving to death. The drain took the form of excesses of raw exports over imports for which India got no economic or material return. The drain was calculated to be so high that it exceeded all the land revenue collected combined and was over half of all government's revenues. In short, if the British had been sincere, land revenue need not have been collected at all. Imagine the prosperity of the peasants then. Imagine what would have happened to the poverty line. The poverty line would have jumped. The number of people under poverty would have been such few. But that was never the whole point of the British rule in India. To quote Dadabhai on the drain theory in 1880, it is not the pitiless operation of economic loss, but it is the thoughtless and pitiless action of the British policy. It is the pitiless eating of India's substance in India and further pitiless drain to England. In short, it is the pitiless perversion of economic loss by the sad bleeding to which India is being subjected that is destroying India. So Dadabhai puts it so well. He says that India is being bled by the British and they're doing it mercilessly and pitilessly. If you could say that they were destroying India, you could say that they were destroying India on purpose, by plan, right? So Dadabhai declared the drain is the basic cause of India's poverty and the fundamental evil of British rule in India. Dadabhai said that the colonial rule in India by the British had an economic motive, and the economic motive was the most fundamental evil of the British rule in India. Romesh Chandra Dutt or R.C. Dutt in his Economic History of India puts his version of the drain theory poetically. The taxation raised by a king is like the moisture sucked up by the sun to be returned to the earth as fertilizing rain. But the moisture raised from the Indian soil now descends as fertilizing rain largely on other lands and not on India. So great an economic drain out of the resources of a land would impoverish the most prosperous of nations on earth. It has reduced India to a land of famines, more frequent, more widespread, and more fatal than any known before in the history of India or in the world. The greatest political merit of the drain theory was that it was easily grasped by a nation of peasants. The drain theory, after all, was nothing but an articulation of what the peasants were experiencing in their daily life. Nobody could understand these theories better than the persons who were experiencing the torrid side of the drain theory. Money was being transferred from one country to another was easily understood, for the peasant lived that life every day through the moneylenders, through the landlords, through the lawyers, and others. No other idea could arouse people more than the thought that they were being taxed so that others in far off lands might live in comfort. The contradiction between the welfare of the Indian people and the economic policy of British imperialism was starkly brought out by the drain theory. It was hence inevitable, in a sense, that the drain theory became the main staple of nationalist political agitation during the Gandhian era. One of the effects of the agitation against economic exploitation was the ideological hegemony of the alien rulers over Indian minds, that is, of the foundations of colonial rule in the minds of the people. Dadabhai systematically destroyed all claims of the positive effects of British rule. Regarding the claim of having provided security of life and property, Dadabhai said this: the romance is that there is security of life and property in India. The reality is that there is no such thing. There is security of life and property in one sense, that is, the people are secure from any violence from each other or from native despots. What is secure and well secure is that England is perfectly safe and secure to carry away from India and eat up in India her property at the present rate of 30 to 40 million pounds a year. To millions starving in India, life is simply half feeding or starvation or famine and disease. Nothing could be truer than this, and Dadabhai puts it most eloquently. You can pause the video and read this part again. With regard to the benefits of law and order, this is what Dadabhai said. There is an Indian saying, pray strike on the back, but don't strike on the belly. Under the native despot, the people enjoy what they produce, though at times they may suffer some violence on the back. Under the British, the man is at peace, there is no violence, his substance is drained away, unseen peaceably and subtly, he starves in peace and peaceably perishes in peace with law and order. The satire that Dadabhai brought into his statements was telling. Dadabhai was one of the most eloquent writers at that point in time, and he was one of the biggest lawyers as well. And it was Dadabhai who was the most forward and impatient when it came to seeking freedom for India. Speaking at the International Socialist Congress in 1904, Dadabhai put forward the demand for self government and treatment of India like other British colonies. He put forward the same message in the 1905 Banaras session of Congress as well. In 1906, as President of the Indian National Congress, he laid down the goal of the national movement as self-government or Swaraj, like that of the United Kingdom or its colonies. This was one of the first time that Congress said that yes, Swaraj or self-government is our goal. Tilak had already begun pushing for it early on. Dadabhai made it a possibility within the Congress. The scientific analysis of the Indian economy and the systematic breach of British destruction during the last 3 decades of the 19th century provided the nationalists of the 20th century with the literary base that they would need to further the national movement. Once the masses were educated, it was then time for mass movements. Enter Balagangadhar Tilak and then later Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Thank you.